In the heart of the city stood one of the most powerful corporations, a place where ambition met fear, and at its center was Alexander Hahn, the millionaire CEO everyone dreaded. His name alone was enough to silence an entire meeting room. He was a man built on precision, discipline, and results. Failure was not an option under his rule, and those who made even the slightest mistake rarely got a second chance. Every employee in the company knew the unspoken rule: never cross paths with Mr. Hahn unless absolutely necessary. His cold, piercing gaze could make even the most confident executives lose their composure. The sound of his footsteps in the hallway sent shivers down spines. He didn't raise his voice often, but when he did, it echoed like thunder, sharp, cutting, and unforgettable. His office, perched high above the city skyline, mirrored his personality: immaculate, minimal, and intimidating. The glass walls overlooked a city that seemed to bend beneath his will, yet the man himself remained untouchable, hidden behind layers of power and emotional walls. Rumors swirled about how he had built his empire from nothing, sacrificing everything, including his humanity, to reach the top. No one dared question his decisions. Department heads trembled during presentations, praying that their reports met his impossible standards. He dismissed people without hesitation, not out of cruelty, but because he believed weakness had no place in business. To him, emotions were distractions, and kindness was a weakness that led to failure. Yet behind that mask of authority, there was something deeply unsettling, a quiet sadness in his eyes that no one ever noticed. Alexander wasn't born ruthless, life had shaped him that way. Betrayals, losses, and years of isolation had turned his heart to stone. Power became his armor, control his only comfort. The empire he built was his fortress, a place where no one could hurt him again. Still, in the silence of his success, loneliness haunted him. He had everything: wealth, respect, and fear, yet something inside him remained painfully empty. Every night, the city lights reflected off his office window, reminding him of the world he had conquered but never truly belonged to. And so, the legend of the ruthless CEO continued, a man untouchable, unapproachable, and unchangeable. Until the day a new secretary walked into his office and dared to do what no one else ever had: look him in the eyes without fear. When Elena Park first walked into Hahn Enterprises, no one believed she would last a week. The position of the CEO's secretary was considered a curse, a revolving door of nervous assistants who either quit or were dismissed within days. Yet, Elena wasn't like the others. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, her calm eyes and composed demeanor hiding a strength that no one expected. On her first day, whispers filled the office corridors. "She doesn't know what she's getting into," someone muttered. "Mr. Hahn will crush her spirit before the week ends," another said. But Elena simply smiled, offering polite greetings to everyone she met. She wasn't naive, she had heard the stories. The warnings. The fear. And yet, something inside her refused to be intimidated. When she finally stood before Alexander Hahn, the infamous CEO, the air in the room felt heavy. His gaze was sharp and cold, assessing her like she was another replaceable piece in his machine. But instead of shrinking under his stare, she met his eyes, steady, unflinching, and fearless. That single moment changed everything. For the first time in years, Alexander felt something unfamiliar: surprise. Elena treated him like a person, not a monster. She didn't stammer when she spoke to him, didn't avoid eye contact, and didn't flinch when his tone grew harsh. When he barked an order, she responded with quiet efficiency. When he lost his temper, she remained calm. Her composure disarmed him in ways he couldn't understand. The employees watched in disbelief as she began to navigate the impossible, working closely with the man everyone feared. She organized his chaotic schedule, handled his meetings flawlessly, and even dared to question him when something didn't make sense. No one had ever done that before. But it wasn't just her competence that stood out, it was her empathy. She saw through his anger, sensing the loneliness behind his sharp words. When others ran away from his temper, she stayed, unshaken. Slowly, Her courage began to chip away at the icy walls he had built around himself. There was something magnetic about her, not because she was loud or bold, but because she was quietly brave. She didn't fight his power, she met it with understanding. In a world where everyone bowed to fear, Elena Park became the first person to face the CEO's darkness with light. And though she didn't know it yet, her courage would become the spark that changed not only Alexander Hahn's life, but the entire company's fate. At first, Alexander Hahn didn't understand why Elena Park unsettled him. She was efficient, professional, and always composed, but there was something in the way she looked at him, something no one else dared to show. It wasn't fear. It wasn't admiration. It was understanding. And that alone shook him. He had built his entire world around distance, walls so high that no one could ever get close enough to hurt him again. But Elena didn't try to climb those walls, she simply stood beside them, waiting. She never forced her presence, never tried to impress him. Yet every time she entered his office, the silence felt different, warmer, calmer, almost human. Their conversation started short and sharp, just work-related exchanges. But slowly, something began to change. She would make small observations about his stress, gently suggesting he take a break or eat something during long nights of meetings. At first, he brushed her off, but when she quietly left a cup of coffee on his desk without a word, he found himself unable to ignore the gesture. Days turned into weeks, and what was once a professional routine began to feel like an unspoken connection. He started noticing the little things about her, the way she remained patient even when the workload doubled, how her soft laughter broke through the tension of endless deadlines, and how her honesty never wavered, even when it could have cost her favor. One evening, long after everyone else had gone home, Alexander caught her working late, typing up a report she wasn't even assigned to finish. When he asked why, she smiled gently and said, "Because someone has to make sure you don't drown in this." For a man who had spent years being obeyed but never cared for, her words struck deep. That night, he didn't see her as an employee. He saw her as a person, one who wasn't afraid to reach out to him, even when everyone else stayed away. It confused him, even frightened him. Emotions were dangerous, he had learned that long ago. But with Elena, he couldn't stop himself from feeling. In her quiet defiance, she became the first person to make him question the life he had built. The ruthless CEO who once believed he needed no one began to rely on her presence, the sound of her voice, the calm in her eyes, the sincerity that slowly thawed his frozen heart. He didn't know it yet, but what started as a simple working relationship was turning into something deeper, something powerful, a connection that would change both of their lives forever. Behind Alexander Hahn's flawless suits, unshakable authority, and emotionless demeanor lay a story no one dared to imagine, a past carved in pain, betrayal, and loss. His coldness wasn't born of arrogance, it was born of survival. Long before he became the feared millionaire CEO, Alexander had been a young man filled with dreams and warmth, a son, a lover, and a believer in people. But the world had not been kind to him. Years ago, his family's small business had been crushed by powerful investors, people he once trusted, leaving his parents bankrupt and broken. His father's health declined under the weight of failure, and his mother's tears became his daily memory. With no one left to protect them, Alexander swore he would never again be powerless. That vow turned into an obsession, success at any cost. He worked tirelessly, studying, competing, and sacrificing everything that once made him human. Friends drifted away, relationships crumbled, and laughter became a memory. By the time he built his empire, he had already built his prison, made of glass offices and sleepless nights. To the world, he was untouchable, but inside, he was still the boy standing in the ruins of his past, vowing never to be hurt again. Then came her, Elena Park. Her kindness was a mirror he didn't want to face. She saw through the perfection he'd crafted, glimpsing the tired man beneath the power. At first, he hated it. Her empathy felt like weakness, a threat to the armor he had built. But slowly, she began to unravel the truth he had buried deep within himself. One evening, after a particularly tense day, she found him alone in his office, staring out at the city lights. His voice was low, almost breaking as he said, "People only respect power, not kindness. Kindness gets you destroyed." It was the first time he had ever spoken something personal. Elena didn't respond with pity. Instead, she said softly, "Power can protect you, but it can't heal you." Her words lingered long after she left. For the first time, Alexander began to question everything: the choices, the walls, the loneliness. Beneath the fearsome CEO image was a man who had simply forgotten how to trust, how to love, and how to live without control. As his past resurfaced, so did a painful truth, that he wasn't truly alive, merely existing. And somehow, this woman, his secretary, had become the one person capable of awakening the heart he thought was long dead. The arrival of Elena Park at Han Enterprises began a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first. The employees noticed small changes: a softer tone in Alexander Han's emails, a rare smile shared during meetings, even a willingness to listen to suggestions without immediate dismissal. The man who had once ruled through fear was beginning to change, and it all traced back to one simple truth: Elena's courage and compassion had touched something he thought was lost forever. Alexander's transformation wasn't sudden. It was painstaking, internal, and deeply personal. Each interaction with Elena chipped away at the icy walls surrounding his heart. He began to reflect on his past, the betrayals, and the sacrifices that had shaped his ruthlessness. But now, instead of seeing the world solely through the lens of fear and control, he started to understand the value of trust, empathy, and genuine human connection. Elena never tried to force him into change. She simply remained herself, kind, brave, and unwavering. That constancy became his anchor. When the pressures of running a vast empire threatened to drag him back into old patterns, she was there, silently reminding him that there was another way. Slowly, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, and even to apologize, actions that would have been unthinkable for the man he once was. The transformation extended beyond their private interactions. The company itself began to reflect this new energy. Employees felt a renewed sense of motivation and respect, no longer ruled by fear but inspired by a leader who had learned the strength of compassion. Meetings were more collaborative, ideas were welcomed, and morale soared. People spoke of the CEO not as a tyrant but as a visionary who could command respect without intimidation. And then there was the personal side of Alexander's redemption. The connection between him and Elena blossomed into a delicate, profound bond. Love, something he had long denied himself, slowly found its place alongside his ambition. He realized that power alone had never fulfilled him; it was the warmth, trust, and partnership Elena offered that completed the life he had been missing. In the end, Alexander Han was no longer just the millionaire CEO everyone feared. He became a symbol of transformation, a man who learned that true strength lies not in fear, but in the courage to open one's heart. And Elena, the secretary who dared to look him in the eyes without fear, became the catalyst for a change that would impact not only his life but the lives of everyone around him. Where once there was terror, now there was respect; where once there was isolation, now there was connection; and where once there was cold power, now there was warmth, redemption, and love.